Hi class, I'm William Marshall and I'm doing the final project on supernatural rituals between the Buddhist religion and the Hindu religion. I'm looking at comparative analysis on their beliefs in supernatural between the two religions. Comparative analysis ritual is that of supernatural. Buddhists and the Hindus have the belief, both religions have the belief of reincarnation, which is and rebirth, which is the process of how they look at the soul after one dies. And then there's their karma theory, which is basic laws of cause and effect, based that your actions in the present are based on what happens to you in reality is what determines what part of the afterlife you go to. And then I'm going to focus on the key issues of one, the supernatural realms between the Buddhist and Hindu religion. The second thing I'm going to focus on is I'm going to look at the gender roles between both religions, and the biggest question I ask of them all is how does Buddhism and Hinduism look at supernatural and the question of immortality? See, supernatural is anything that cannot be that is not human, something that cannot be explained by the laws of physics or by the laws of science or nature. And prime example of that, you see it with Frankenstein with Mary Shelley, you see it with Bram Stoker and Dracula. Buddhism is part of it is a spiritual philosopheric teaching tradition that Sir Gautama founded. He was an Indian crown prince. What they believed was he was the prince of what is now formerly known as Nepal during the 5th century. And one of the two of the biggest beliefs in Buddhism is that of the Four Noble Truths and that of the Noble Eightfold Path. Buddhism's view on the idea of reincarnation, rebirth, and karma is that in Buddhism, rebirth is a cycle of life and death, which is based on one's actions, which is pretty much the karma effect. In Buddhism, their faith and their beliefs is that the notion of karma represents the law of cause and effect, which where it is about the person of your actions. Your actions decide or determined by whether you did something that was good or you did something that was bad. That determines which realm you go to in the afterlife. Buddhism, they have six realms, and they're considered the six realms of Samara. I have it all. You got the devas, you got the asura, the human realm, you have the animal realm, you have the hungry ghost realm, and you have the underworld. And I listed my source where I got some of this information from at the bottom. Hinduism is based, it is an ancient Indian religion. It comes out of India that believes in karma and reincarnation, which is, they refer to it as moksha. They have gods and goddesses for each realm. Unlike the Buddhists, they don't actually believe in a god, they believe in a teacher. Hindu views on supernatural rituals is that of the Vedic, the Tarnik, and the folk. In Buddhism, I put up a comparison chart, the comparison study between Buddhism and Hinduism and how they have something actually in common. There's the Mara. He is known as the spiritual demon of the Buddhist underworld, and he's actually the same, uh, known in Hinduism as Yama. They have the same demon. And there's actually a comparison to Mara, is that you could look at Empress Heel, historical comparison is that Empress Heel of Norse mythology, Lucifer Morningstar from Christianity theology. See, one of the biggest questions is Buddhism and Hinduism's view on supernatural rituals and their view on immortality. This is what I found very interesting in my research is that Buddhism, according to one of my studies, that Titanic Buddhism from Mr. Bara, is that Buddhism does not believe in a god or an avatar. They believe, or a prophet. They actually believe in, nor do they believe in any kind of supernatural ritual, is that they don't believe in a supreme power and that they only take instruction. They can only seek instruction from a teacher. Buddhism, their view on immortality is that it's part of nirvana, which is your eternal, is not an eternal soul, but that's one of their paths to enlightenment. And that the idea of they actually reject the idea of a permanent soul and immortality. On the other hand, you have Hinduism that has the theory of atma, which is that the soul is immortal and eternal, and that the soul is divine, and that only the powers of internal immortality can be granted by that of a god. One of the interesting subjects was that, and based on the research, was that of Buddhism versus Hinduism. And I did a comparison chart on the gender roles, which I have listed, is that Buddhism actually believes that there's a spiritual path of enlightenment, and they believe that enlightenment comes from knowledge and wisdom. And then and they believe in a teacher, but the thing with them is that they actually allow for monarchs and they allow for females to actually become monks down the road, which is high level of the Buddhist preacher. Hinduism, they look at it differently. They favor men over women. They also, I actually found it pretty rare that Hinduism does that from historical context that if you were a woman, you couldn't be a priest or a nun during that time or have any kind of leadership role. They were more considered housewives in Hindu culture. See, the other topic was that of Buddhism versus Hinduism. I made a comparison chart on their death rituals, which the Buddhist stuff is on the left side of your screen. The Hindu stuff is on the right side. They do actually have different beliefs, and they have different customs too. The reason why I chose this topic was that I've studied mythology, religion, I've taken universal humanities classes, just I've never actually got do a comparative study on different religions from different cultures, which if you look at Buddhism and Hinduism through anthropology lens or look at it from a historical background, Hinduism and Buddhism are probably some of the oldest forms of religion known to exist in the universe. And I've listed all my sources. And just to wrap things up, is that I found it interesting how the Buddhists they date back to the 5th century, but yet they actually do share a lot of common background and common ideas like reincarnation and rebirth, and they share a lot of things that are very common, which I found that interesting. That there's a lot of stuff that they relate to, and a lot of people don't understand that there's you could connect, you could look at a comparative between Hinduism and Buddhism and realize that they're not that far apart from each other. And thank you guys for your time and the class.